Hi, this is Mary Baca with Remotely Unique, coming to you from Albuquerque today with a very special guest who's going to shed some light for us all on astrology and how to use it in our daily life. His name is Ryan Tate. Before I get started with that, I want to just announce a couple of cool things that are coming up at the end of July, so specifically July 31st, August 1st, and August 14th. I'm doing a Reiki certification. It's actually a Reiki summer retreat for mothers and daughters ages 11 to 14. I'm super excited about it. And then also I'll be doing a Reiki training on July 28th in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So those are some things coming up for those of you that may be interested in that. So Ryan, I have some questions to ask you. You know, we met before today, and you just had me in awe. Like when we met, I just learned so much in the little bit of time. I know it's been several months, but I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy like really knows his stuff about astrology and moon cycles, and even though I'm a holistic practitioner, like I don't know much about that stuff. I've had my astrological chart done before. It's been many years. But I don't know probably as much as I would like to because it's very intimidating. And that's one reason I'm so glad you're here, because I think maybe you can simplify it for us. And then also, and I'll mention this again at the end, Ryan's going to be doing a class for us. And we haven't set the date yet, but that'll be kind of a spin-off of his presentation and his interview today. So when did your interest start in astrology, and how did that get started?
My interest in astrology started when I was very young because I've always been interested in alternative healing modalities. And when I was younger, I got into herbalism. And when you get into herbalism and you start reading a lot of, like medieval texts, and because I am that nerdy, you really do start to get into sort of the planetary associations that plants have in traditional medicine to the zodiac in general. And so it really got me into it, and eventually I started looking more into, how the signs connect to mythology as well, because I've always been interested in mythology, and one thing led to another, and it just really got me invested in the art.
Because you're young, so how young were you? I was 10.
Honestly, I was 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was 9, so I was a very young boy interested in this.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, you're an old soul, so I believe that, that at 9. Wow, that's pretty impressive. And so was there anybody or anything that kind of influenced that? Your growing, kind of query into that whole realm of things?
I honestly feel like, I grew up in a really religious background. And even though, like people don't think of like traditional religion as being like an avenue into, like more mystical subjects, when you really look at like the experience of religion and like the spiritual experience in general, I don't think it's too much of a jump to conclude that it really can take you to different places. And what my parents taught me about Jesus is that, like he is a being of love, all that stuff, and how I interpreted that and all the stories of the Bible is I saw them as these like really rich sort of texts that have a lot of human nature in them. And it really helped me, especially in the mythological front of getting into astrology. And I wanted to be a healer and help people because that, like that's the Christian thing to do.
Right. Yeah. To be kind and love people and all of that.
Yeah.
And so kind of like, if you could draw kind of like a sequence of your evolution in this whole area, like you started looking at plants and herbs.
Yes, I first it started with plants and herbs. And then it went into a little bit of astrology mixed with mythology. And then it went into crystals. I wanted to be a geologist. And then I was like, they have mystical properties too. I cannot be stopped. And, it just sort of grew more and more from there. And I really started getting into African traditional spirituality. It was really liberating, being a black man in America, it's really hard, and having these spiritual outlets and reconnecting with these ancestral ties of, ancestral medicine and astrology and other forms of spiritual wisdom really helped sort of crystallize my identity. And it really gave me that sense of belonging and home place.
Oh, that's beautiful. So it sounds like you're saying there's cultural aspects to astrology.
Oh, 100%.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
So there is not a single culture on this planet that did not have some form of astrology. There is, what we consider to be Western astrology, which sort of originated out of the Mediterranean. We might call it Hellenistic astrology today because we think of it as being Greek. However, it's also very influenced by Sumerian culture as well as Egyptian culture and the rest of the Mediterranean. We have Aztec and Mesoamerican astrology, which is also really interesting, and they had a whole mathematical system that went with it as well. There is evidence of, sadly, a lot of it has been lost because of cultural erasure, but there's also evidence of Plains Indian astrology and also Pueblo Native astrology as well. And I really do wish that there was more of it left. I would love to read it. But and continuing on, we also have, of course, Chinese astrology, and the list goes on.
Wow, so it can get quite expansive.
It's very expansive. That's why it's confusing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming for people. I know just even for myself, and I do a lot of things and dabble in a lot of things, and if it's overwhelming for me, just regular lay people, I'm sure just get overwhelmed.
Exactly.
What is the benefit, do you think, for just people, just regular people living life?
I feel like people can get really turned off by astrology, especially when it's really generalized or it feels a little poppy, like Cosmopolitan magazine saying, better not wear yellow shoes today, But astrology has a lot of really wonderful practical applications, especially in how to tap into your own success. For instance, in a natal chart, which is a snapshot of the sky at the time of your birth, you can look to certain planets to where you can find, where the universe naturally will lend you that aid. Or, if you don't believe in the universe, then, it's just where you yourself as a human being naturally have skill. And, Jupiter is the planet of luck, growth, and expansion. And when you look at where he is in your chart, you can see that is where I am lucky. That is where I can grow, and that is where I can expand without inhibition. And that can help you sort of access that form of success for you.
For sure, like setting intention.
Exactly.
But how is that established, that Jupiter, that planet in particular, is for luck? How does that come about?
That happens because humans have been observing the motions of the stars and the effects that they do on us for centuries. And over time, we sort of start to realize, when Jupiter crosses into XYZ sign, I notice that I am lucky here, that I am growing here, that I am benefiting here. And all these signs also have different qualities that sort of play into how the planet is expressing themselves.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What are some of the qualities of the other planets?
I will go in order. So we have what are called the luminaries, meaning those that light up the sky. And if you guess the sun and the moon, you would be correct. The sun is all about vitality. It's life-giving. It's joyful. It's childlike and creative. But there's also very much so a sort of knight in shining armor quality to the sun. There's a romance there. And so he's what forms our identity and who we aspire to become and what we strive to be. Whereas the moon is very sensitive, mystical, dreamy, and primal. It's our instinctive self, and it's also how we want to be nurtured and how we nurture others, and it's how we react without thinking. It's how we react without actually asking ourselves or putting things through our, societal lens. And then we have the personal planets, which are sort of the, the planets that are closest to Earth in a way. We have Mercury, and Mercury is all about communication, thinking, learning. It's a very cerebral planet. It's about that mental activity. And it really helps us understand how we communicate and why we communicate the way that we do, because it goes into thinking patterns. And then we have Venus, and Venus is, of course, about love, beauty, sensuality, and what we enjoy and find pleasure in. And what I really love about Venus is that it's also what we value. And I think it's really beautiful that what the planet of what we value is also what we find beautiful. I think that that's a really pretty connection. And then after that we have Mars, and the reason I skipped Earth, if you're wondering, is because Earth is always 180 degrees opposite the sun, so we always know where it is, and it's a part of the theme of our sun sign. So Earth shows us where we find our purpose in the material world. And so if your sun is in what is your sun sign?
I have no idea.
You don't?
No, I don't.
When is your birthday?
I am a newbie.
Okay. The sun sign is what we all know. Like, I'm a Libra, or I'm a Cancer.
Oh, I'm a Virgo. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. You being a Virgo, your Earth sign would be in Pisces, because that's what's directly opposite. And so that shows that the reason why you are here on this earth is for spiritual development and for healing, and especially for mental healing. Wow. Yeah, and you are serving your purpose.
Interesting.
As you can see.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for validating that.
Of course.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I know when you said sun sign, I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Sun sign. That's just a really that's just a term for just like the zodiac sign. And then after Earth, we have Mars, which is our passion, it's our drive, and it's also how we get mad and why we get mad. Like it's what sets us off. But what sets us off is what gives us the energy to go.
Yeah.
So it's Mars is really
gets us
important.
moving. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. It gets us moving. After Mars, this is when we hit the what we call, it's not generational planets, but it's what we call the graduation planets, because it usually has to deal with grades of people. Like when you look at a graduating class and you say, I don't know why they were really into fashion, or, the class of 2015 was really into the arts, and it's that energy from Jupiter and Saturn that shaped the graduating classes. And Jupiter is about, as I said, luck, expansion, growth, and spirituality, as well as blessed wisdom. And I do make that distinction because Saturn is also connected to wisdom, but it's much more of a tangible and almost material wisdom of experience versus like a wisdom that you gleaned from, I don't know, like meditating or reading a text. It's a lived experience. And because of that, Saturn, rules trials, difficulty, but also growth, of course, because we need those things to grow, as well as status and achievement. And then we get into the outer planets, which are generational. They do affect us on a personal level, but they're big. They affect whole groups of people. And that's Uranus, who rules revolution, change, innovation, and returning to humanness. Neptune, which rules divinity. Neptune's hard to describe almost in a way that is like digestible. So let me try and put myself together for a second so I can describe
Translate,
Neptune.
right?
Yeah. Neptune rules our fantasies and how we see things in a rose-colored way. Like when you're looking at something and it just appears out of this world and truly dreamlike in nature. That's what Neptune rules. And because of that, he does inspire our visions, but not necessarily the most realistic of visions. And lastly, we have Pluto, who is the great destroyer and the great transformer. And he's where we encounter incredible upheaval and destruction, but also the rebirth as well, and the regrowth after the storm.
So transformative.
Yes, very.
Interesting. And then there's planets that haven't been named, or right?
There
Is
are
that
so
correct?
many. We have a bunch of planets and minor planets, and we call them asteroids in astrology. Like, for instance, if one of you listening wants to go out and look up asteroid 1336, I assure you there is one. I don't know the name, but there is one. But the ones that we use the 4 goddess asteroids, as well as Chiron, who is one of the centaurs. So the goddesses, I'll go in order of their asteroid numbering. We have asteroid number 1, who is Ceres. She is the first asteroid actually discovered by an Italian astronomer in 1807. So she's actually one of the first planets outside of the traditional planets that was discovered. And it's really ironic because we initially did use her as a planet, but fell out of popularity because of people were trying to clean up astrology. Ceres...
What's the difference between a planet and an asteroid?
It is all about size. And Ceres actually has been reclassified as a dwarf planet, just like Pluto. Oh. So Ceres at this point is no longer considered an asteroid, but a dwarf planet. But because of just, the fact of people saying it over the years, she will forever be an asteroid.
Like people won't get out of that mindset.
And she's all about, fertility and motherhood and growth, but also the reaping cycle. So she rules the cycles of life, life and death. And it's not the same as the rebirth of Pluto. It's much different because she also rules physical healing and natural healing as well. Then we have asteroid number 2, Pallas Athene. She is all about justice, diplomacy, wisdom, and tact, and she rules like lawyers, legal systems, things like that. Asteroid number 3 is Juno. She rules our relationship to authority, our relationship to power, our social image, as well as partnership and marriage. And then we have, lastly, Vesta, who rules. Vesta is a delight. She rules miracles. She rules things that are beyond explanation. And she rules purification and cleansing. And then the centaur that we use is Chiron, the wounded healer, which he shows us where we need to work on ourselves the most and where our deep wounds lie that we can grow from.
And are there pictures, not pictures, but symbols, like say if somebody wanted to get more in touch with the energy of Jupiter, for example?
All of the planets have glyphs, and you can actually Google them. Yeah, you can Google planetary glyphs, and it'll pull up.
Glyph?
Yes, Glyph, glyph. And these glyphs also have meaning, but I wish that I could hold up a board. This is why people need to come to the class so that I can show these glyphs.
Yeah, we're gonna give them this teaser, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because just by that sometimes helps harness the intention and the specific energy. I know from other things. I haven't done that with planets yet, but I have a feeling that's coming and that this is going to inspire me to do some of that. But yeah, that's very cool. And so the class, you can show pictures of those things.
Yes, I can.
Awesome. I think you answered this, but is the moon tied into astrology? I think you were saying yes. And if so, how?
The moon is very important. So being one of the luminaries, she gives light to our identities, meaning that she is one of the main shapers in how we act and behave. It's actually really interesting because we call that the big 3 in really basic layman's terms, which is the rising sign, the moon sign, and the sun sign. And so the moon and how it plays out in the self is, as I said, that really sensitive part of us, our emotional reactions, our primal self. But in what's called horary astrology, which is predictive, it can sort of be like a map of how we can do things. The moon helps us plan where we are going to be appreciated the most for our feelings. So, for instance, we just had, at time of recording this, a full moon in Capricorn on June 24th. And full moons are all about release, and they're all about the final form, because the moon, how a lot of cultures perceive it, is the cycles of womanhood, or the cycles of even pregnancy, where the new moon is, waiting for it. And as we go and we have a waxing moon, it's the growth of that belly. And the full moon is the fullness of the belly. So it's that life, it's that invigoration, and it's that power. So it's a time to really, if you're into that sort of thing, like to manifest, really, because it's going to give birth. Mm-hmm. It's going to give that life. And whereas new moons are about new beginnings. New moons are about infinite possibility. It's a blank slate. And new moons really show us, also, it's about the dark night of the soul. They'll really put us through those experiences that we need to go through to grow. And waxing moons are about growth. And it's from that new moon that the moon waxes, and you're growing from what you went through. And then you have the understanding to manifest what's actually good for you on the full moon. And then it starts to wane again, and that's when you release what wasn't good for you and go back to your new beginning.
So the cycles are new, waxing, full,
and waning.
Yes. Ah, interesting. And they all have their purpose or how they affect us.
Yes.
I do a lot of work with first responders, and I mean, they admit, like on a full moon, that there's a lot more. So why is that, do you think?
The moon, I think on a physical level, we are 70% water as humans, and the moon has a pull on the tides. And I think that, especially on full moons, it pulls on us, and she calls on us, as she is our primal self. She calls on us to be primal and to sort of, like wolves, to sort of howl at the moon, go a little crazy. And if you look at mythology even, you'll see that a lot of goddesses who are associated with the moon are also associated with what's called lunacy. That's actually where we get the word lunacy from, Luna. And, it's that sort of mental, emotional reaction that she calls within us. And I also think that on an astrological level, it's just really, sort of putting us in that energy. It's a very energized point. And a lot of people, when they're not ready for it, they don't know how to process it physically. So they can get a little crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it is. And even in the mental health field, I mean, we joke about it, but it happens, where our clients are more elevated emotionally, and to not always bad either, sometimes in very powerful, wonderful ways.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, it's probably been about 5 years ago, myself and some of my holistic friends did, we were all in our own homes, so we had a conference call, and we did a full moon meditation.
Yeah.
It was powerful.
Yes.
Truly. I've never experienced anything like that that I know of, right from a moon. It was really powerful. I'll never forget it. In amazing ways. We all manifested stuff. And
that's beautiful.
It was just really cool. Yeah, so it can be really powerful. I think a lot more than what. Maybe that's something we could do sometime, is have a full moon meditation here.
Oh, definitely.
That would be so awesome. Even if people can't come physically, now, we were all on the phone. We weren't even together physically, but it was really an awesome thing. To some people, astrology and things like that are very woo-woo.
Yes.
And how do both of these, so the moon and astrology, affect us in everyday life? And how can people out there, what would you say to people in terms of how we can use that every day to help?
I would say that it really astrology, especially just on a practical level, can really prepare you for things. And what I mean by that is, like we just recently came out of a Mercury retrograde.
Oh, yes.
Yes. and it was a pretty.
Did we come out of it? Because this week, I swear, I would think that it extended itself.
We are still in its shadow period, which it always lasts a few weeks, but for the most part. And when we know about a Mercury retrograde coming, we can prepare ourselves for things that Mercury does. For instance, Mercury retrograde will always bring technological difficulties. It's always going to bring scheduling difficulties. When you're aware of that, you can preemptively say, okay, Mercury retrograde's coming. I'm going to back up all my files. I'm going to make sure that I have a cell phone case because I know I'm going to drop it and it's going to crack. And that's what happened to me.
You're all reliving your past.
And, like all these things that are just really practical that you can be prepared for. And similarly with the moon, when you can track the cycles of the moon, you can say, like, I know on these days I might be a little bit more emotional. So maybe I shouldn't plan a big meeting where I have to sign like a document that's important. And I should wait till I'm more level-headed, or where I know I'm going to be more, stable in myself.
I've heard that. I've been told that. Don't sign any, contracts this week, because of the moon cycle.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners and our viewers what Mercury retrograde is, and when does it usually happen in the calendar year?
Okay, so Mercury retrograde is when the planet Mercury appears to be going in retrograde motion. This happens when the planet Earth actually goes past the other planet, and it appears that that planet is moving backwards, but that's not actually happening. It's an optical illusion. And during that time, Mercury behaves in a way that is inverted to himself. So the planet Mercury, as I stated earlier, communication, mental activity, short-term travel, stuff like that, is going to make all of those things inverse. So instead of clear communication, you're going to get chaotic communications. You're going to get chaotic travel situations. And also, like, learning might be harder. So it makes a planet behave backwards. And during these times, though, astrologers use RX to signify a retrograde. And RX, I love that because we use that as a prescription in medicine. And retrogrades are medicine. They make us go through the things that we have to go through. So even if it seems inconvenient or it seems painful, you always need to ask yourself, what am I learning from this? So retrogrades are powerful.
Yeah. Well, what else has a retrograde to it?
Everything but the sun and the moon are retrograde.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and retrogrades. Oh, and I'm so sorry, I forgot to answer this one, but it can flow nicely. Retrogrades happen periodically different for every sign and their orbit. So usually for Mercury, you're going to get a retrograde 3 to 4 times a year. And versus for Mars, you get a retrograde every 2 years.
Oh.
So it depends on the planet's what we call eccentricity in astronomy, which is the orbit around the sun. And so with Venus retrograde, that's about bringing difficulty in relationships, bringing difficulty with handling money, and also difficulty with self-esteem and self-worth.
Which one is that?
Venus.
Okay.
And for Mars retrograde, that's going to be a lot of passive aggression versus forward aggression, a lot of self-destruction versus outward destruction. So it inverts the nature of these planets.
And so if it's an optical illusion that they're going in retrograde, what causes the issues?
What causes the issue is that the planet at that time, I believe, because there is something called declination and inclination in astrology, and it's sort of how the planets are positioned with each other. So even though it appears to be going backwards, it's more about the angle that the planet has to our proximity that's causing the issue.
Okay. Powerful stuff, though.
Very.
I mean, so when did Mercury come out of retrograde? Was it this week?
Yes, it was the 22nd.
Yeah. it was crazy because, I mean, I was foggy and I was dropping things. And,
it just wasn't it.
We were watching a class the other day on TV and I couldn't get the TV to work. I don't know. That could be operator error too.
Yeah.
But yeah, just some real stuff. Like, it's a real thing. What else, like, in terms of how we can use this that you might think is helpful? Like, why even delve into astrology in terms of everyday life?
I think one of the best reasons why is self-improvement. And, I feel like, especially in the society that we live in, we really do emphasize a lot of outward self-improvement and not inward self-improvement.
Yes.
People are like, oh, like, did you get a promotion? Are you going to the gym? Are these tangible things that we can see? But if you're not fully and holistically in a healthy place, including internal self-improvement, then, life's going to be a lot more difficult for you if you haven't gone through the things that astrology can make clear. For instance, looking at your Chiron to see what issues am I, like where are my trauma responses coming from? Because that's what Chiron will show us. For instance, I have Chiron in Scorpio at 16 degrees in my first house, which means that my trauma response mostly come from how people react to me. Ever since I was young, I have had people react very volatilely to me. I was bullied a lot. And because of that, my wounds are around myself and my personal power. And so when people do things that seem to mirror that experience, I react super strongly. I will get hurt. I will lash out even maybe. But because I am aware that my wound is originating from that rejection of self and my own rejection of myself, I know, hey, I'm going to pause and I'm going to refocus this event to understand that this person is reflecting their issues at me. This has nothing to do with me. And I am totally worthy. And I am totally fine. And I don't deserve this.
Like changing your narrative about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you do personal astrological readings for people?
I do.
Charts?
I do.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. I have a Instagram that I can be reached through called Romance of the Stars.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I'll look for you on that.
Yeah. And, I have very reasonable prices.
I was going to ask you, I'm sure your prices vary depending on what somebody wants, but give us some idea about what your pricing for different services is.
Okay. So for a basic natal chart reading, I'm probably going to be charging $75. And now for the natal chart, you can either request an in-text natal chart, which is going to be where I just completely write everything out. I put it in a nice PDF, a nice organized PDF, and I send it to you by email. Or you can request a video call or even just a phone call if you'd like, where you call me and I read your chart to you. And you can take notes on what interests you versus just me giving you basically a book, because my charts usually will reach 100 pages, depending on if the person also requests specific asteroids or if they ask for very particular things. It can reach 100 pages easily. And that can be very overwhelming. Once again, astrology is very overwhelming in that sense. But I personally think that for people who aren't very familiar with astrology, a video reading or a phone reading would be much preferred.
And how much are those?
And those are the same. Those are both 75.
Nice. Well, it sounds like a lot goes into it. Like it's not just a simple thing, and it's also not just like plugging something in. Like I think there's some astrologists out there that will just put a program together and it's that informal. Like it begins and ends at that. But it sounds like yours goes more in depth, and it's actually you.
It is
doing the all the figuring out. And I
write them all independently. I don't cut and paste.
Wow.
Because I feel like every person is unique, and every person does need that unique approach. So whenever I see a chart and I say, oh my goodness, this person has so much Taurus energy, they're going to appreciate if I use flowery language. So I'll go out of my way to, use the most poetic language. And they're like, this was so pretty to read. Thank you so much. And I'm like, yep, I got you.
Oh, cool. So, that's really neat. So really individualized.
Very.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I would love to talk to you about maybe coming on board on the resilience team. And we did talk about that when we met. That would be amazing because, it just for all kinds of things. We'll have more discussion about it, Yeah. Any questions for me? I don't know, in terms of any of this, I think, or anything, really.
How do you think opening up a pathway to astrology would help your team in the future?
Oh my gosh. Well, my team is all about it.
Okay.
All about anything. They're so open. I love all of them so much because they're just open and they're just ready and willing to just absorb any new information. They all are gifted in their own unique ways, and so the team complements each other beautifully. But yeah, I'm going to ask them because I think we're like that could just be what's coming to me now, Ryan, is even having you do like a group astrological read, you know what I mean? Like configuration would help me as their lead.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, Veronica has, I will destroy it if I even try to use the terms, But, for you to do your magic, and be able to know, like, the configuration of my team and, like, what does appeal to them based on their astrological chart, and would be, I think, amazing to be able to access that because that's what's going to go natural to them.
Yes.
So we'll have to talk about maybe doing that. So that's how I think. Like I would, and I know they all would. Like I don't think there's not one person on the team that would be like, oh, I don't want to do that. I think they'd be all, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. When are we going to do it? And that's maybe that's even another, I don't know if you do that kind of thing now, but that's something that maybe we could offer as a service that you would provide through resilience for businesses. Because, because I do a lot of stuff with businesses and teamwork and identifying like what's going to make your team be the most effective, is the goal of a lot of companies. And putting together kind of like maybe we could start with that, right? Like do that for my team and then have that become a template and almost like a service that you would offer through resilience. Yeah, I think that'll be amazing, actually. Yeah. And then you should be a hypnotherapist because your voice is like very relaxing. It's like, I'm all relaxed after this interview. You. Yeah, but I definitely want to talk to you about that because I think, one, it would be interesting to see what comes up for all of them. Yeah. They mentioned their birth dates and like their signs. Several of them have. And I don't have much of a response because I'm not that knowledgeable in the area, so we'll have to talk about doing that.
Yeah, super cool.
I think that would be really great. Have you ever done something like that for like a work group?
No, that would be so interesting. I would love to try that out.
Let's do it.
Okay.
It would be amazing. And yield so much information that would help me as their leader.
Yeah.
Whether it's to assign certain projects based on what's going to appeal to somebody. Do you see what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah. Because
it intrinsically feels just right for them based on their astrological, placement or, again, I don't know if I'm using the right terms.
You're doing great.
But, we'll have to do that. And so anybody out there, who listens or sees this, you can access Ryan say again your Instagram.
Romance of the Stars.
Okay, so there's that, and you can also, if you can't remember that, you could replay this, but you could also get a hold of him through me. I think that, Ryan and I are going to continue to be in contact with each other, and I really want you to join the team, and I think, we're going to have some great collaboration. So
awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and so you can view this later, on Monday, what's the date? The 28th? 28th, July 28th. You'll be able to view this podcast on Spotify, on our YouTube channel for Remotely Unique, on our Facebook post for Remotely Unique, iTunes, and Amazon Music. So those are all the places that you'll be able to view this. And please like and share it. Let people know about this podcast and all the others that we do. Our whole point is to raise awareness on a variety of topics that really help people grow. And thank you. You know, I asked you to talk about how you can use astrology in your everyday life, and you did that and even more, Ryan.
Thank you so much.
So I really appreciate it. And I'll have to have you come back on for, when we do the group thing, I'll bring you back on so we can talk about how that looked and, you know, what my experience was, you doing that for the team, and then use that as a service that we can offer through Resilience.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.